Hey there! Appreciate you joining us today. It's a Thursday, special day for doing our weekly broadcast. Why are we doing this today? Well, I've got a class to teach tomorrow, so I love to talk to people every week and get a message out. And this week, I think I got something really good, and it came from a news article of really good interest in business in the last few days. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about setbacks. Could it be your launch pad to where you're wanting to go? Well, my name's Jerry Eisenhower. I'm with CVC Success Group, and with me today, hey, is my cohort, Cheryl Eisenhower. And today, hopefully, we give you something to think about, because we all go through this. Sales slow down. We lose a key employee. Maybe a major customer walked away. Maybe you made a bad hire. Maybe you opened a new location that didn't perform. Maybe you invested money in marketing that didn't produce results. Maybe you introduced a new service. You were convinced that it was going to take off and nobody bought it. Or maybe the business you've spent years building, it just isn't producing the results it once did. When something like that happens, our natural reaction is, how do I get things back to the way they were? But today I want to challenge that thinking because sometimes going back isn't the answer. Sometimes a setback isn't telling you to retreat, it's telling you to redirect. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is some of the people in our lifetimes or in history who have had failures and they redirected. They actually did what John Maxwell said in his book. They failed forward. So, Cheryl, what's your thoughts about today's topic?
Well, there's a lot of businesses that go in different directions. Sometimes, like you said, it's your fault. Sometimes it's the economy's fault. Sometimes it's just nobody's fault. It just does not make and produce. So you have to step back. You have to choose again. Many people find out that it wasn't the page they needed to be on, but for some reason, somebody up above them or below them or something decided, let's get him out of this and put him into something that's more profitable. We see it all the time.
So, let's talk about some success stories that came from setbacks. Well, we've all heard of Walmart, and we probably all know who Sam Walton is. And this is the story I read the other day because back in 1945, he opened a Ben Franklin variety store in Newport, Arkansas. And over the next 5 years, he turned that into the top performing Ben Franklin franchise in Arkansas. Then he encountered a devastating problem of his own making. When he had negotiated the lease, he had failed to secure an option to renew it. When the lease came up, the landlord simply refused to renew it because he actually wanted that successful store for his son. Walton essentially had no choice, but he had to give up the location, sell the store's inventory and fixture. Now, think about this in a minute. Sam had spent 5 years taking a struggling store and turned it into an extremely successful business. And his success actually helped make the location attractive enough for the landlord to take it back from him. His historical account says the Newport store had become the top Ben Franklin franchise in the state when the landlord basically kicked him out. He described losing that lease as a major low point in his business life. But this setback forced the Walton family to leave Newport and look for another opportunity. They moved to Bentonville, Arkansas, where Walton opened Walton's 5 and 10 in 1950. And here's what happened. When he negotiated his new location, he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. The Bentonville deal involved securing a 99-year lease arrangement. And I've actually been to that store. It's actually a museum about Walmart there now. And I actually visited it one day when I was in Bentonville on business doing a seminar. 12 years later, he opened the first Walmart's Discount City. And from there, he was off to the races. 1962 opened the first Walmart. and builds one of the world's largest companies. This is the whole thing. The setback, it redirected his business. It taught him the lessons he needed to build the next business better. Sam learned that lesson the hard way. He didn't just bounce back. He used that lesson to in life. The first time he failed to protect his lease, the next time he negotiated long-term protection. The setback didn't destroy his entrepreneurial future. It educated him for it. So this fits. Don't just bounce back. Launch forward into perfection. Cheryl, what'd you think about that story?
I think it's remarkable. The man had the initiative. He wasn't going to give up. He moved on. He kept things on going on. The problem is a lot of people when they hit a failure bump, they quit. They quit trying to try. I couldn't do this. It's not for me. Or they'll change careers completely. He proceeded on with the same career he had, just in a different location and in a different style, if that's a good way to put it. But I don't know anybody now that doesn't know where a Walmart's at. I don't know about most towns, but we can go in about any direction and run into a Walmart. So the man has made a mass thing out of it. And there are others. I mean, I'm not going to go any farther because I know you're going to mention some of them, and I'll just leave that to you and go at that point.
Yeah, because problems are a part of business. They're part of being an entrepreneur. And here's something I've learned over the years. Your success isn't determined by whether you encounter setbacks, because you're going to do that. Your success is determined by how you interpret and respond to them. Two business owners can experience almost the same problem, and one will say, "This proves it isn't going to work." The other says, "Okay, what's this trying to teach me?" Same problem, completely different response, and often completely different outcome. So here's another example. How about Steve Jobs? Steve Jobs of Apple. Steve Jobs helped create Apple. Think about that for a minute. He built a company from practically nothing and watched it become successful, and then was pushed out of the company, one he helped create. That happened to him in 1985. For many people, that would have been devastating. And I'm sure it was devastating to him at that time. But something very interesting happened afterwards. Steve Jobs didn't disappear. He started another computer company called Next. He also became involved with the company that became Pixar. These experiences exposed him to different technologies, different people, different business models, and different ways of thinking. Years later, something remarkable happened. Apple, the company he founded, acquired Next, and that brought Steve Jobs back to Apple. The setback that pushed him away from Apple actually created the path that eventually led him back. He wasn't the same Steve Jobs. He came back with additional experience, new perspective, new knowledge, and Apple entered one of the most extraordinary periods of innovation and growth in business history. I can still remember seeing a video where Steve Jobs was showing a computer on stage with a wireless connection to the internet. Think about the lessons. When he got pushed out of Apple, it probably looked like a disaster to him. But that setback gave him the experience he needed for the next chapter. That's something worth asking ourselves. What if this isn't simply happening to me? What if there's something I can learn from it? For the home service business, maybe losing an employee faces you to finally improve your recruiting system. Excuse me. Maybe losing a manager forces you to build better management processes. Maybe losing a large customer forces you to stop depending upon a handful of customers. Setbacks hurt, but what you build from them because of it may ultimately make the company stronger. make it stronger. Cheryl, what's your thought about the Steve Jobs story?
I think it's miraculous. I mean, the man had the fortitude to move on. He didn't just throw his hands up and say, I quit, I'm done. We see so many people that do it that way. And they just, or they don't try hard enough. They don't do what they should. No, he couldn't go back to where he was at. They let him go. So he just went off in another direction. And sometimes that direction will take you down a path that doesn't seem as good as what you left. But I've always believed that right on down that path, there's another door. And if you pay attention and watch for that door and enter it, it changes your life completely. Everyone thinks that it's coincidence or it's luck or it's whatever. Whatever you do with your life as a general rule, unless there's something catastrophic, is a way you pushed it. The door you opened, like Steve opened separate doors. He saw that there was that door had an opportunity and he went down it. Not only did it move him ahead there, but it got him back to where he was again, like you said, as a much more brilliant person. And
Yeah.
Apple, I don't believe it'll ever go away.
Okay, great. So here's another example. Sara Blakely. She's actually been one of the people sitting on the Shark Tank panel now. Well, she went down a road that didn't work that led to one that did. She wanted to become an attorney. There was a problem. She could not pass the test to get licensed. Eventually, she had to reconsider the direction she was going. And she ended up selling fax machines door to door. Imagine what it was like looking at that moment. She wanted to be an attorney, but now she's knocking on doors selling fax machines. Most people wouldn't call that progress. It probably looked like she'd taken a major step backwards. But this taught her something, the sales experience. It taught her how to sell. It taught her persistence. And eventually, she came up with a problem with women's clothes that gave her the idea of what became Spanx. Then came more rejections. They weren't standing in line to produce her idea. She kept going. She started Spanx with about 5,000 of her own money, and that idea became an enormously successful company. Now think about this. What if she had passed that attorney's test, become a successful attorney? Would she have been successful as she has been with the product she rolled out? The thing that looked like a failure redirected her towards something much bigger. That's what I want you to think about. What are you trying to force that may no longer be the right direction? That's a difficult position, but there's a difference between persistence and stubbornness. Persistence means I refuse to give up on achieving the goal. Stubbornness means I refuse to consider another way of doing it. I'm not going to listen to anybody. They're not the same things. So, Cheryl, you probably know what Spanx are. I presume it's some type of woman's clothes. So, what do you think about that?
That's what makes me slim and trim. Yeah. No, I don't think there's a woman in the United States that doesn't know what a Spanx is. They're things to make your shape different. They're tight, they fit, and just so you know what you're talking about. But the thing about it is, it she took her own money, and I think that's what makes her so popular on uh, Shark Tank. And so that's what they're there for. They're there to take an idea and hopefully make it great for people. Some of them aren't good. I've watched enough of them. Some of them are. But yeah, Spanx right now, I don't, that's one of those things that I don't know many women that don't have at least one, even little tiny women wear Spanx. So
Okay.
that's where the innovative people come from, the ideas that nobody wanted.
That's it. So, let's talk about another one. I grew up and the wonderful world of Disney was on Sunday nights when I was a kid. And there was a guy there named Walt Disney. You've probably heard of Disney, Disneyland, and what all it's become. Because when you think of the name Disney, You think of enormous global entertainment company. I mean, my God, they got cruise ships, they got theme parks, they got movies, television. They've got characters recognized around the world. Who doesn't know who Mickey Mouse is, Goofy, and all the other things he came up with? But let's look at what his early businesses were. Laugh-O-Gram Studio. It went bankrupt. Imagine what it's like at that point. If you've never been through this, if you've never watched your worldly possessions sold on the courthouse step boats, you have no idea what that's like to watch your possessions go away. Imagine being Walt Disney. Your company failed, but the bill still exists. The dream hasn't worked. What do? Disney didn't say, I'm not an entrepreneur. He went to California. He started again. And eventually, Mickey Mouse came alive. And beginnings of one of the most recognized entertainment companies in the world, this is a lesson for us. A business failure does not necessarily mean the business owner is a failure. I mean, you look at the Super Bowl. What do they say after? I'm going to Disneyland. I'm going to Disney World. That's an important thing because maybe you've tried opening a new location and failed. That doesn't mean you're incapable of expansion. Maybe you hired somebody that didn't work. Maybe you launched a new service. It just didn't work. The key is, what did you learn? What assumptions were wrong? What would you do differently? What would you never do again? Because failure becomes expensive only when we pay the tuition and learn the lesson. Back to you, Cheryl. Your turn to talk.
Hey, we've all been to Disneyland. But the thing about it is the man didn't give up. He moved on. There's a big difference, and we see it day to day of people that it didn't work. They regrouped, they put things back together, they made it go. We've also seen people that roll up like a ball and never get back out of it. And I think that's where a lot of time your personality comes into it. Are you able to fail and come back? Or are you the type person that just throws their hands up and gives up? I mean, he didn't. I believe it, there would be no Kentucky Fried Chicken if he had given up. There's so much out there that as we go through life that we don't realize a lot of times the failures are just the stepping stones. One of the questions I asked when I hire is tell me something you failed at. I don't care what they failed at. I really don't. My question is, what did you learn? And what did you do with that knowledge?
That's it. Here's another one. Fred Smith. You may not know the name, but you ever heard of FedEx? This is one that business owners have gone to appreciate for overnight shipping of packages. When Federal Express began operations, it wasn't what it is today. On the first night, they delivered 186 packages to 25 cities. They lost $29 million during its first 2 years. Imagine what it's like sitting there. You got payments on aircraft, employees, fuel, facilities, equipment, all kinds of operating expenses, and not enough packages. There are moments when the spreadsheet tells you this just isn't going to plan. But Fred Smith and his team had to find a way forward. And FedEx transformed the delivery industry. The lesson that you should blindly keep throwing money at a losing business, that's not what I'm telling you. The lesson is a difficult beginning doesn't automatically predict the ending. Sometimes you're early. Sometimes the time isn't right for the system yet. Sometimes the pricing isn't right. Sometimes customers don't understand the value proposition. Sometimes your execution isn't good enough. That's where leadership comes in. You have to determine, is the destination wrong or does the route simply need adjustment? That's a critical decision that winners have to make whenever they run into a roadblock. Back to you, Cheryl.
Yeah, this is a company that could have just thrown their hands up. I mean, we've got other things. We've got, UPS. We've got other places that could have taken it, but they didn't. And that's where they shine today. I mean, I don't know of anyone. We've got FedEx places all over around us, and will they be there forever? I don't know, but I think they'll be there in some form or the other. Maybe not exactly FedEx, but I think it'll be there for many, many decades yet.
And the next one, this is one of my favorites, folks. And I've talked about this one in some of my videos before, and that is Colonel Harlan Sanders. Sanders operated a business in Kentucky that became known for his chicken. Circumstances changed. The state built a new interstate highway that bypassed his restaurant. The traffic was gone. The customers disappeared. The revenue disappeared. And there ain't much you can do about it when the government builds a highway. That could have been the end of the story. Instead, Sanders took the thing that customers loved most, his chicken recipe and his cooking process, and began pursuing a different business model. Instead of depending customers coming to his restaurant, he took the ideas to other restaurants and became the foundation of the KFC franchise system. Think about it. The original model was one restaurant serving chicken. Now he had a setback and he asked himself the question, what if other restaurants could serve my chicken? That's a completely different business model. The road literally changed for the Colonel, and business changed with it. There's a tremendous lesson here for each of us. Sometimes we're protecting the method instead of protecting the mission. Maybe customers are changing the way they buy. Maybe technology is changing. There ain't no maybe to it. Technology is changing. Maybe our competitors are changing. Maybe private equity is entering the industry and people are concerned. Maybe consumers just don't respond to the same market they did 10 years ago. Maybe the labor market has changed, and buddy, has it ever changed? Maybe AI is having a dent in what you do. How do I make everything go back to 2015? You can't do that. The question is, how do I win the market that exists today? And like I said, the story of the Colonel is always one that impressed me. So Cheryl and I were going up Interstate 75 through Kentucky, heading from either from or to Louisville, Kentucky a few years ago. And I looked up where the Colonel's store was, and it was right off the interstate, just a mile or two. So I had to stop there and look at it. And it was an old motel there, and it had a rebuilt kitchen. And it really was an impressive sight. Cheryl, do you remember when we stopped at the Colonel's place?
Very well.
So, what's your thought on that after what I just said about the Colonel?
Smart man, very smart man. But the thing about it is, generational aging has changed him again. It used to be Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then everybody decided they wanted to be healthy, so the name was changed to KY Chicken. And so, as things, even as good as a brand is, generational changes can come in at that level.
Yep. So here's another one for you. Henry Ford. His first company was an education for him because his first venture was called the Detroit Automobile Company, and it failed. In fact, it went to bankruptcy and became the Cadillac division of General Motors today. Imagine if Ford had decided, maybe I'm not very good at the automobile business, but he learned. He refined his ideas. And Ford Motor Company changed not only automobiles, but manufacturing himself. When you do studies in the lean, Henry Ford comes up. Maybe your first attempt isn't the final destination. Maybe it's your classroom. This happens consistently and constantly in small business. The first compensation plan didn't work. Your first price book didn't work. The office manager isn't the right person. You attempted departmentalization. Doesn't work. Your marketing agency doesn't produce. You make an acquisition, it doesn't go smoothly. That doesn't mean the strategy is wrong. Maybe you just have to improve your execution. Experience is an expensive teacher, but it can be extraordinarily effective if you're paying attention. Back to you, Cheryl, your thoughts.
Hey, you're 100% right. I don't really have anything to add. You put it all in that one, but the thing about it, what I'd like to do is challenge anybody out there that's watching now or that's going to watch later or that knows anybody that has never failed in a business or if anything has ever failed in their business because I think we need them on the next broadcast.
That's it. And you know, as I'm reading all this, I've had significant failures in my life. And actually, that's what inspired me to write one of my early books, Chaos to Reinvention, where I went through and actually wrote down and wrote about the setbacks, the failures I'd had in life. And I did this not to cry, not to make anyone feel sorry, but hopefully for people to learn from the mistakes I had made. And hopefully it's changed. It's the basis for what I do every day in my coaching business. But let's bring it all together. There's a phrase we hear constantly: bounce back. You suffer a setback, bounce back. Something goes wrong, get back to where you were. Maybe it's time to not bounce back, but rather it's time to launch forward. Maybe where you were isn't where you need to go. Maybe your sales were dropping, forcing you to change your marketing. Maybe losing employees is telling you something about your culture. Maybe declining profit is exposing a pricing problem you've ignored. Maybe being exhausted every day is telling you you haven't actually built a business, you've just built a job. Maybe the problem isn't something you need to recover from. Maybe it's something you need to learn through. That's different things. So, Cheryl, you go, and then I've got some questions to ask for people for when they experience a setback.
I think when a business is going south, you need to ask yourself, do I really want to be doing this? What do I really want to do? I mean, you've heard me say it more than once. People should not spend their life doing a job that they don't enjoy because it's work. If you enjoy what you're doing, it's just a good day. So think first, is that a business I want to attempt to sink deeper into, or do I start a business that satisfies me?
Yeah. So here's 5 questions to ask when you experience a setback. Let's make this a practical exercise. Next time something goes wrong in your company, don't simply react. Get away from the noise. Get out by yourself and ask yourself these 5 questions. What is this setback actually trying to tell me? What's it telling me? Not emotionally, not factually, but what's it telling me? Employees are leaving. What is it telling me? Callbacks are increasing. What is it telling me? Leads aren't converting. There's a message there. Don't simply treat the symptom, diagnose the problem. Did I make assumptions that turned out to be wrong? That's another one. What opportunity exists now that didn't exist before? You know, that's everything I went through. That's what Steve Jobs did, Sara Blakely, Colonel Sanders, all of them. The old door closed. There's a new door became visible. Sometimes we stare at that closed door so long we never turn around and see the opening behind us. What do I need to change? What do you need to change? Who should I blame? Should I blame the economy, the employees, the competitors, the customers, the government, the weather, the interest rates? But here's the question leaders have to ask: what can I change to alleviate this? Is it the pricing, the training, the marketing, the hiring, the management, the systems, my own behavior? You do this and you found the path. And then you got to ask yourself the question: should I prepare this path or choose a different one? That's a tough question. It's going to keep you up at night. Hopefully, you've got mentors that you can talk to, but that's the tough one. Sometimes you need persistence. Keep going, fix the problem, improve the execution, stay the course. But sometimes the evidence is there telling you something. It's time to change direction. Great leadership requires enough persistence to keep going, but enough humility to recognize when you're going the wrong way. So, Cheryl, what's your thoughts at this point?
My opinion is I think people get too deep into it that they can't think about what's coming. That's why I like what you said about getting away. Walk away. Go out there, look, hug a tree, whatever makes you happy. But get a true concept of what's going on instead of just that day to day, moment to moment, that this problem, that problem. Take it and look at the whole picture. We always called it 50,000 miles in the cloud. Look down. See what you're looking at. Are you looking at something that's salvageable? Salvageable, yeah, yeah, that's the word. Is it something that you can put a band-aid on till it gets better? Or is it something you need to just let somebody else take hold of and go into another adventure? Everybody can't do that. They're not geared. They're not. And a lot of people, once they have failed, they're too scared to move forward. But sometimes your path is set with out there and you just have to see it again. Don't be afraid to look behind another door.
You know, if you're running a business, no matter what kind of business it is, you're going to experience disruption of your business. It's unavoidable. Markets change, people change, technology changes, competition changes, customer expectations change. The companies that survive aren't necessarily the companies that never experience setbacks. They're the companies that adapt. And there's another point here. When things are going well, we don't often change anything. Why should we? We're comfortable. We're in our comfort zone. The business is making money, customers are calling, employees are busy, and then something happens. And we're forced to confront the problems we've actually been avoiding. We've been ignoring them. That's why a setback can become a launch pad. It creates urgency, it creates clarity, and sometimes it gives us permission to make the changes we've known we needed to make for years, but we just been refusing to. Persistence doesn't mean refusing to change. If you want to remember one thing from the day, don't confuse persistence with refusing to change directions. Persistence says, I'm committed to the destination. Wisdom says, I'm willing to change the route. Steve Jobs changed routes. Sara Blakely changed routes. Walt Disney, Colonel Sanders, Henry Ford, and the list keeps going on. The stories weren't successful because nothing went wrong. These stories became remarkable because of what they did when something went wrong. So, Cheryl, what's your closing words for today?
Yeah, a final launch, a new launch is not for everybody, but to relaunch your own business can be, like you say, the thing. Do do what it takes to make your business what it ought to be. But either way you go, you've got to keep your eyes open. Even after you relaunch, you've got to make sure that you stay on it. Or if you just re-improve, you've got to stay on it. And it's sometimes it's not an easy path. Neither one of them's easy. We look at all these after they relaunch something. A lot of times those relaunches fail, so they did it again. It's again how much can you do before you're ready to give up? Neither one of us like giving up, so that's where you and I keep trying, and I keep failing, but I keep trying.
That's it. So, here's our closing challenge to you for the week. Think about the biggest setback you're facing right now. Not five different ones, but one. Pick one, write it down, and underneath it, answer these five questions. What is this trying to tell me? What assumption was wrong? What opportunity might this create? Do I repair this path, choose another one? Because you got to build the launch pad. You build it through reflection. You build it through learning. You build it through decisions. And most importantly, you build it through actions. Because the setback was good if you did something good with it. Sometimes a detour leads to a better destination. Sometimes a closed door forces us to look for another one. And sometimes that setback becomes a launch pad that redirects you towards where you really need to go. So this has been Jerry Eisenhower and Cheryl Eisenhower today here on the CBC Home Service Success Network. I want you to know we are both committed to helping you turn your business dreams into your business realities. You see our email addresses up here on the screen. We'd love to have a conversation. We'd love to be able to help you through whatever challenges, whatever setbacks that you have in this world. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us today for another episode of our weekly broadcast and podcast. We hope it's been a time of value for you. And I want you to know it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you each and every week like this. So with that, we'll see you next week. Hope you had a good week this week, and I hope it's a fantastic week ahead. Talk to you later. Have a great weekend, folks.